What if Jack Sparrow was evil? The sea should have been silent that night. There were no storms above the Black Pearl. No thunder rolled across the heavens. No lightning split the sky. The moon hung pale and wide over the Caribbean, casting its cold silver light across the water as if the world itself had stopped breathing. But Captain Jack Sparrow could feel something moving beneath the waves. Not a beast. Not a ship. Not the wind. Something older. Something waiting. He stood at the bow of the Black Pearl with one hand resting loosely on the rail, his dark eyes fixed on the distant shape of Isla de Muerta. The island did not appear on ordinary maps. Most sailors believed it was a myth, a nightmare whispered about by drunkards who had spent too long staring at the black edge of the horizon. They said it could only be found by those who already knew where it was. They said the island did not want visitors. Jack smiled at that. The island would have visitors tonight. Behind him, the crew of the Black Pearl moved with restless excitement. Men sharpened blades, loaded pistols, tied ropes, and whispered about the treasure waiting inside the island's hidden cave. They had spent months following rumors, dead men's clues, stolen maps, and half-burned Spanish records to reach this place. Some believed they were about to become rich. Some believed they were about to become legends. Barbossa believed he was about to become captain. Jack knew it. He had known for weeks. Hector Barbossa was too ambitious to stand behind another man forever. He smiled too calmly when Jack gave orders. He watched the crew too closely. He spoke to men when he believed Jack was too drunk to hear. He planted little seeds in their minds with every quiet conversation. A fair share. A better captain. A stronger hand. A man who would not waste treasure on strange dreams and stranger maps. Jack had heard it all. Every word. Every whisper. Every betrayal before it had even been born. But he had said nothing. Because Jack Sparrow had learned long ago that betrayal was most useful before the traitor realized he had already lost. Land ahead, one of the men called. Jack did not answer at first. His fingers tapped against the rail, slow and thoughtful. The island drew closer, rising from the mist like a broken tooth. Its cliffs were black, its caves hidden beneath jagged stone, and around it the sea moved strangely, curling inward as if dragged by the pull of something unnatural. Barbossa came to stand beside him. "Quite a place," Barbossa said, his voice rough and pleased. "A man could hide a fortune in there." Jack turned his head slightly. "A man could hide more than that." Barbossa looked at him. Jack smiled. It was the kind of smile that made men laugh when they thought they understood him. The crooked grin. The lazy eyes. The careless tilt of his head. To most people, Jack Sparrow was a strange pirate with too much rum in his blood and too little sense in his skull. That was the lie. The greatest lie he had ever told. Because Jack was not careless. He was patient. He let men think he was foolish so they would speak freely around him. He let them think he was harmless so they would step closer than they should. He let them laugh because laughter made them blind. And blind men were easy to kill. The boats were lowered. The crew rowed toward the island under moonlight, their oars cutting through black water. The entrance to the cave was almost invisible until they were upon it. A narrow mouth in the stone opened into darkness, and from within came a faint golden glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. The men grew quiet. Even Barbossa stopped smiling. Jack stepped out first. His boots touched stone. The cave seemed to breathe. They moved through tunnels slick with salt and shadow, torches raised high. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. Gold light flickered ahead. The sound of water echoed from unseen places, mixed with something else. Whispers. Not voices exactly. More like thoughts pressing against the walls of the world. Then the cave opened. The treasure chamber of Isla de Muerta stretched before them, and every man froze. Gold covered everything. Coin spilled across the floor in shining rivers. Chalices, crowns, plates, statues, jewels, and ancient relics lay piled higher than a man's head. Treasure from the old world. Treasure stolen in blood. Treasure taken from temples that should never have been touched. At the center of it all sat a stone chest filled with Aztec gold. The men stared like starving wolves. Then they rushed forward. Laughter exploded through the cave. Pirates dropped to their knees, scooping coins into their hands, shoving jewels into pockets, biting gold pieces, shouting claims over piles they could never carry. Some praised the sea. Some praised luck. Some praised Jack. Barbossa stood beside the chest, staring down into it. His face glowed with greed. Jack watched him from a few steps away. This was the moment. He could feel it. Not the treasure. Not the crew. Not even Barbossa. The curse. It sat inside the gold like a sleeping god. Jack had heard the stories. He knew the warnings. He knew the price attached to the Aztec coins. Men who took them would no longer feel warmth. They would no longer taste food. They would no longer enjoy drink. Beneath moonlight, their true forms would be shown as death wearing human skin. Most men would have feared that. Jack Sparrow did not. To fear a curse, a man first had to believe he was still bound by ordinary life. Jack had never believed that. He walked slowly toward the chest. The crew barely noticed him. Barbossa glanced up, but only for a moment. His attention returned to the gold, hungry and possessive. Jack reached into the chest. His fingers closed around one coin. The second he touched it, the world changed. The cave went silent. Not truly. The men were still shouting. Gold was still clattering. Water was still dripping from the rocks. But to Jack, all of it fell away beneath a deeper sound. His own heartbeat. It slowed. Once. Twice. Then the curse entered him. It was cold at first, colder than any sea at midnight, colder than the deepest grave. It spread through his fingers, climbed his arm, wrapped around his chest, and sank into his blood. For one terrible moment, Jack felt as though something ancient had placed its hand inside him and squeezed his soul. Then the pain became pleasure. Power flooded him. Not the power of a crown. Not the power of a ship. Something greater. Something purer. A dark freedom that laughed at death itself. He could feel his body change beneath his skin, not fully, not in a way the others could see, but deep inside. Every fear he had ever carried grew smaller. Every hunger grew sharper. Death no longer stood in front of him. Death stood behind him. And Jack realized something that made his mouth slowly curve into a smile. He had not found treasure. He had found permission. Permission to take. Permission to rule. Permission to become something no king, governor, pirate lord, or admiral could ever be. Untouchable. He looked down at the coin in his palm. It gleamed like an eye. Barbossa's voice cut through the moment. Captain. Jack did not look up at first. Barbossa stepped closer, watching him carefully. Around them, the crew continued digging through the treasure, but a few men had noticed the change in the air. They stopped laughing. They looked toward Jack. Barbossa's hand rested near the hilt of his sword. Jack saw it. Of course he saw it. Something wrong, Jack? Barbossa asked. There it was. Not Captain. Not Sir. Jack. The mask slipped for half a second. That was all Jack needed. He turned the coin between his fingers and slowly lifted his gaze. Barbossa stared at him. For the first time since Jack had known him, Hector Barbossa looked uncertain. Jack smiled. Not the foolish smile. Not the drunken smile. Not the charming, harmless, ridiculous smile that had fooled half the Caribbean. This smile was clean of humor. It was evil in its purest form. The kind of smile that did not appear before a joke. It appeared before a killing. Barbossa's eyes narrowed. Jack drew his sword. The blade flashed beneath the torchlight. Barbossa barely had time to pull his own weapon before Jack was on him. Steel struck steel once, twice, then Jack twisted aside with sudden speed and drove his blade into Barbossa's body. The sound that left Barbossa was small. More shock than pain. The crew froze. The cave went still. Barbossa looked down at the sword buried in him, then up at Jack. His mouth opened as if he meant to speak, to curse him, to demand an answer, to remind the crew that Jack had betrayed them first. Jack leaned closer. "You were thinking too loudly, mate." Then he ripped the blade free. Barbossa dropped to his knees among the gold. Blood darkened the treasure beneath him. One of the crew shouted. Another reached for his pistol. A third took a step back, his face pale with terror. Jack turned toward them. The cursed coin was still in his other hand. Moonlight spilled through a crack in the cave roof and touched his face. For a moment, something beneath his skin seemed to shift. His eyes looked darker. His smile widened. The men saw it. They did not understand what they saw. But they feared it. "Captain," one of them whispered. Jack tilted his head. Then he attacked. The first man died before his pistol cleared leather. Jack crossed the distance in a blur of motion and cut him down across the gold. The shot fired wild, cracking against the stone ceiling. Another pirate charged with a roar, but Jack turned, caught the man's sword, and drove his own blade through his chest. Panic broke the crew apart. Some tried to fight. Some tried to run. Some shouted Barbossa's name as if the dead man could rise and save them. Jack killed them all. He moved through the treasure chamber like a nightmare wearing a man's coat. His pistol thundered through the cave. His sword flashed in the torchlight. Boots slipped on coins. Men crashed into piles of gold. Blades sparked against stone. Screams rose and died beneath the weight of the island. The crew of the Black Pearl had been killers, thieves, raiders, and monsters in their own right. But they had never seen anything like this. Because Jack Sparrow was not fighting like a man trying to survive. He was fighting like a man enjoying the discovery that survival no longer mattered. A blade cut across his arm. He barely noticed. A pistol fired near his shoulder. He laughed. One pirate struck him hard enough to drive him back against the chest of Aztec Gold. Jack looked down at the wound, then slowly looked up again. The man who had struck him began to tremble. Jack stepped forward. The pirate dropped his sword. "Jack," he begged. "Please." Jack's smile faded. That was worse. "Captain," he corrected. Then he killed him. One by one, the voices ended. The cave that had been filled with laughter became a tomb. At last, Jack stood alone. Bodies lay across the treasure. Blood ran between coins. Smoke drifted from his pistol. His sword hung loosely in his hand, dripping onto the stone floor. Barbossa lay near the chest, eyes open, face frozen in disbelief. Jack walked over to him and crouched. For a while, he simply looked at him. Then he reached down and took a coin from beside Barbossa's hand. "You wanted the pearl," Jack whispered. "I wanted everything." He stood again. The curse pulsed inside him. It was stronger now. Or perhaps he was only hearing it more clearly. It did not speak in words. It spoke in desire. It showed him images. A sea with no masters but him. Ships kneeling under black flags. Pirate lords bending the knee. British governors hanging from their own walls. Tortuga burning and being reborn under his command. He could see it all. And he wanted it. But wanting was not enough. Jack Sparrow had survived because he understood timing. A fool took power too quickly and made enemies before he had a throne. A clever man let others build the road, then walked it when they were too tired to stop him. No one could know what had happened here. Not yet. The crew had to vanish from history in a way that served him. Barbossa's death had to become more useful than Barbossa's life. The gold had to be hidden somewhere no man could find it, because if the curse could make Jack feel this powerful, then another man might one day try to take it from him. Jack would not allow that. He cleaned his blade. Then he began the work. For hours, he moved through Isla de Muerta with cold purpose. He gathered the Aztec gold, piece by piece, not as a greedy pirate collecting treasure, but as a king securing a weapon. The chest was too obvious. The cave was too known to those who had already stepped inside. He needed the treasure buried deeper than rumor. So Jack used the island against itself. He found tunnels beneath the cave, old passages carved by water and time. He dragged the chest through darkness where no torch should have burned. He marked false routes. He collapsed weak stone behind him. He placed ordinary treasure in misleading places, enough to convince any future thief they had discovered the prize while the true curse remained elsewhere. He hid the Aztec gold in a chamber beneath the chamber, beyond a path that could only be opened when the tide pulled back under a blood moon and the sea revealed stone steps for less than a minute. Even then, that would not be enough. So Jack made a map. Then he destroyed it. He made another map. Then he cut it into pieces. Then he burned all but one. The final piece he kept close, not because he needed it, but because Jack liked symbols. He liked reminders. He liked knowing that the world could be held by something small enough to hide in a coat. By dawn, Isla de Muerta had swallowed the truth. The crew of the Black Pearl were gone. Barbossa was gone. The gold was gone. Only Jack remained. When he returned to the Pearl, the ship seemed different. Or perhaps it was simply seeing him clearly for the first time. Its black sails hung still in the morning air. Its deck creaked beneath his boots as he stepped aboard alone. The ship had known mutiny in men's hearts. It had known greed and treachery. Now it knew silence. Jack walked to the helm and placed one hand upon the wheel. For the first time all night, he closed his eyes. The sea wind touched his face. He felt no sadness for the dead. No guilt. No regret. Only a strange, perfect calm. The Black Pearl was his. The curse was his. The secret was his. Now he needed a war. Not a small one. Not a tavern brawl between drunken captains. Not a few raids against merchant ships. A true war. The kind that changed maps. The kind that made frightened men choose sides. The kind that allowed one man, standing in the middle of the chaos, to rise higher than all the others. Jack turned the Pearl away from Isla de Muerta and sailed back toward the world of men. By the time he reached the Brethren Court, he had already written the story in his mind. Not with ink. With grief. With anger. With just enough truth to make the lie breathe. He arrived at Shipwreck Cove looking like a man who had survived hell. His clothes were torn. His face was shadowed. His eyes carried the weight of something terrible. He let them see the blood on his coat. He let them see the tiredness in his walk. He let them believe he was wounded deeper than flesh. The pirate lords gathered to hear him. They were not gentle people. They were not trusting people. Every one of them had lied, stolen, betrayed, and murdered their way into legend. But that made them easier to fool, not harder. Criminals always believed they could recognize another criminal's lies. Jack gave them something better. He gave them a lie wrapped in the truth they already wanted. He spoke of Barbossa and the crew of the Black Pearl. He spoke of a British ambush in the dark. He spoke of ships hiding beyond the mist, flags lowered until the killing began. He spoke of cannon fire, screaming men, burning sails, and red-coated officers giving orders without mercy. He spoke of Barbossa fighting to the end. That part nearly made him smile. But he lowered his head before anyone could see it. The British wanted a message sent, Jack said quietly. So here it is. The room was silent. Every pirate lord leaned closer. Jack lifted his eyes. They mean to wipe us from the sea. That was all it took. Hatred was already waiting inside them. The British had hanged their friends, burned their hideouts, hunted their ships, bought traitors, blockaded ports, filled prison cells. The crown had always wanted pirates broken, but now Jack made it personal. Now the British had murdered Barbossa. Now the British had slaughtered the crew of the Black Pearl. Now the British had struck one of their own and believed the pirate world would simply accept it. The Brethren Court erupted. Some shouted for revenge. Some slammed fists against tables. Some demanded names, places, targets. Others spoke of fleets and raids, of making the British bleed from every colony and every harbor. Jack stood among them like a grieving survivor. Inside, he felt the curse purr. It had worked. By the time the meeting ended, the pirate world was no longer a scattered nest of thieves. It was a powder keg. And Jack had already lit the fuse. The first British ship burned 3 days later. Then another. Then 2 more. Then a convoy disappeared near Jamaica. A governor's nephew was found tied to the mast of a ruined merchant vessel with a black spot burned into the wood beside him. The British answered with fury. They sent warships into pirate waters. They raided taverns, arrested smugglers, hanged anyone suspected of raising a black flag. They wanted order. They wanted fear. They wanted the seas back under the crown. But every act of British violence only proved Jack's story true. Pirates rallied. Captains who had once hated each other shared gunpowder and information. Smugglers became spies. Tavern girls became messengers. Shipwrights worked through the night repairing vessels that would sail back into battle before sunrise. And every road led back to Jack. Not openly at first. That would have been too simple. Jack let the pirate lords believe they were acting freely. He let proud captains believe they had chosen revenge on their own. He let the British believe they were crushing rebellion when they were actually spreading it. Every rumor served him. Every battle fed him. Every dead man became another stone in the foundation of his empire. Then came Tortuga. Tortuga had always been wild. A place of music, blood, filth, laughter, and sin. A place where men could buy anything if they had enough gold or enough violence. A place where law came to die drunk in an alley. But because it belonged to everyone, it truly belonged to no one. Jack decided that was a waste. He arrived during a night of rain. The streets were mud and spilled rum. Lanterns swung in the wind. Drunken men shouted from balconies. Fights broke out in doorways. Somewhere, a fiddle played badly while a woman laughed like she had just robbed a priest. Jack walked through it all with calm eyes. Men greeted him. Some with respect. Some with suspicion. Some with fear they tried to hide behind jokes. By then, stories had already spread. Captain Jack Sparrow, survivor of the British massacre. Captain Jack Sparrow, voice of revenge. Captain Jack Sparrow, the man who had escaped death at Isla de Muerta. They did not know how true that last part was. Jack entered the largest tavern in Tortuga just before midnight. The room was packed with captains. Killers, smugglers, gamblers, and thieves. Smoke filled the air. Cards slapped against tables. Coins changed hands. Women leaned against the bar. Pistols rested within reach of every man present. At the back of the room sat the man who truly controlled Tortuga. Captain Silas Rook. He was not a pirate lord, not officially, but he owned half the taverns, bribed half the dockmasters, and had enough blades in his pocket to make even respected captains think carefully before crossing him. He was broad, scarred, and ugly in the way only a man proud of surviving violence could be. Jack approached his table. The tavern quieted by degrees. Rook looked up. "Well," he said. "The famous Jack Sparrow." "Captain," Jack said. Rook smiled. "Depends who you ask." A few men laughed. Jack did not. He pulled out a chair and sat across from him without permission. Rook's smile faded slightly. Jack leaned back, fingers resting on the table. "Tortuga needs order." That made the room laugh louder. Rook laughed too. "Tortuga needs rum, women, and gullible fools with heavy purses. Order can drown." Jack nodded as if considering this. Then he placed a small piece of Aztec gold on the table. Not one of the cursed coins. Something else from the treasure chamber. A fragment. A symbol. Enough to shine strangely under the tavern light. Rook stared at it. Greed appeared instantly. Jack saw it. Men were so easy when they wanted something. "I can make you richer than you've ever been," Jack said softly. "Or I can make sure your name is forgotten before morning." Rook slowly looked up from the gold. "Is that a threat?" Jack smiled. "No. Threats are what men use when they require permission." Rook's hand went for his pistol. Jack moved first. The table flipped. The gun fired into the ceiling. Jack's sword was already out. The tavern exploded into chaos. Men surged back. Chairs crashed. Women screamed. Rook's guards drew weapons, but Jack had chosen the room carefully before he ever sat down. 3 of the men nearest the door already owed him money. 2 others hated Rook more than they feared him. One of the bartenders had been paid that morning to keep a pistol beneath the counter for Jack's use alone. The fight was over before most men understood it had begun. Jack cut down the first guard, kicked another into a table, shot a third through the shoulder, and drove Rook backward across the room. Rook was strong. Brutal. Experienced. His blade came down with enough force to split wood. But Jack was faster. And beneath the tavern lanterns, with moonlight leaking through broken windows, the curse inside him stirred again. Rook saw something flash behind Jack's eyes. His confidence broke. Jack drove him against the bar and pressed the edge of his sword beneath his chin. The tavern went silent. Rook breathed hard, blood running from his mouth. Jack leaned close enough that only Rook could hear him. "You ruled because they allowed you to," Jack whispered. "I rule because they won't have a choice." Then he turned Rook around and forced him to face the room. Every pirate, smuggler, killer, thief, gambler, and drunk watched. Jack raised his voice. "Tortuga has been free for a very long time." No one moved. Jack's blade remained against Rook's throat. Free to rot. Free to betray. Free to waste itself on petty fights while the British build fleets and the pirate lords argue over scraps. His eyes moved across the room. Some men looked angry. Most looked afraid. Good. Fear was honest. "The world is changing," Jack continued. "The British have chosen war. The Brethren Court has chosen revenge. The seas are about to burn. And when the smoke clears, there will be 2 kinds of men left." He smiled. "Those who stood with me." His blade pressed tighter. "And those who were in my way." Rook tried to speak. Jack cut his throat before he could. The body fell. No one rushed forward. No one challenged him. Jack stepped over the corpse and looked across the tavern. "Drinks," he said calmly, "are on him." For one heartbeat, the tavern remained silent. Then someone laughed nervously. Another man raised a cup. Then another. Within minutes, Tortuga began to understand. Jack did not conquer it with an army. He conquered it with timing. By morning, Rook's men had either sworn loyalty or vanished. By sunset, the dockmasters answered to Jack. By the next night, the taverns paid him tribute. Within a week, every ship entering Tortuga gave a percentage of its cargo to the Black Pearl. Within a month, no captain recruited crew, bought powder, sold stolen goods, or arranged safe passage without Jack Sparrow knowing. Those who resisted disappeared. Those who obeyed prospered. That was the genius of it. Jack did not turn Tortuga into a prison. He turned it into a machine. Pirates still drank. They still sang. They still fought in alleys and woke up in strange beds with emptier purses than before. From the outside, Tortuga looked the same. Wild. Filthy. Free. But beneath the noise, everything moved according to Jack's design. Messages passed through his hands. Gold flowed into his stores. Weapons were hidden in places only he knew. British spies were fed false truths and sent home smiling. Pirate captains were encouraged to raid the exact targets Jack wanted weakened. The Brethren Court believed Tortuga had become the heart of pirate resistance. The British believed it had become a nest that needed to be burned out. Both were wrong. Tortuga had become Jack Sparrow's throne. And every throne needed a king. He never called himself one. That would have ruined the game. Kings were obvious. Kings wore crowns. Kings needed banners and ceremonies, and men foolish enough to believe bloodlines mattered. Jack preferred something older. He preferred men lowering their voices when he entered a room. He preferred captains stopping mid-sentence because his shadow crossed their table. He preferred enemies laughing at his name in daylight and locking their doors at night. The curse of the Aztec Gold remained hidden inside him, but it changed the way he moved through the world. He no longer feared blades as he once had. He no longer flinched at pistols. He no longer looked at danger as something to avoid. Danger had become useful. A rumor began in Tortuga. Some said Jack Sparrow could not die. Some said he had sold his soul beneath Isla de Muerta. Some said Barbossa's ghost followed him. Some said the British had shot him 20 times and the sea spat him back out laughing. Jack denied all of it. Then he let the rumors spread. Fear worked best when men built it themselves. Late one night, after Tortuga had finally gone quiet beneath rain and lantern smoke, Jack stood on the balcony of Rook's old estate overlooking the harbor. The Black Pearl rested in the water below, dark and beautiful, her sails moving slightly in the wind. The town behind him belonged to him. The war beyond the horizon served him. The Brethren Court trusted him. The British hunted a lie. Barbossa was dead. The crew was dead. The gold was hidden. And Jack Sparrow was smiling. He lifted a bottle of rum and took a slow drink. For a moment, he allowed himself to enjoy it, even though the curse had already begun to steal the warmth from such pleasures. The taste was weaker than it should have been. The burn did not reach as deeply. That irritated him. The curse gave power, but it also demanded a price. Jack did not like paying prices. He preferred making others pay them. His fingers moved to the small hidden piece of map inside his coat. The final clue to the true location of the Aztec Gold. The secret no living soul knew but him. He looked out at the Black Sea. Tortuga was only the beginning. The British would come. Of course they would. They would bring ships, cannons, soldiers, governors, admirals, and all the pride of an empire that believed itself chosen by God and law. The Brethren Court would come too, eventually. One day, they would realize Jack had grown too powerful. They would whisper. They would question. They would wonder why every victory seemed to benefit him more than anyone else. Let them. By the time they understood the game, they would already be pieces on the board. Jack stepped closer to the balcony rail. Below, the harbor bells rang once in the distance. A ship had arrived. British, perhaps. Or pirate. Or something else. Jack's smile returned. He could feel the horizon calling to him, but it no longer sounded like freedom. It sounded like hunger. And for the first time in his life, Jack Sparrow did not want to chase the horizon. He wanted the horizon to fear what was coming. He turned away from the sea and walked back into the candlelit room behind him, where maps covered the tables and knives pinned routes across the Caribbean. Red marks showed British patrols. Black marks showed pirate movements. Gold marks showed places of power, relics, curses, and legends that most men dismissed as stories. Jack knew better now. The world was full of curses. Full of treasures. Full of monsters. Full of gods pretending they could not bleed. And somewhere beyond the war, beyond Tortuga, beyond the British and the Brethren court, there were powers even greater than the Aztec Gold. Jack placed his hand on the map. His fingers stopped over one name. Davy Jones. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then the evil smile returned. Captain Jack Sparrow, ruler of Tortuga, master of the Black Pearl, bearer of the hidden curse, an architect of a war that would drown the Caribbean, looked down at the name of the sea's most feared legend and whispered to himself. Now then. The candle flames bent toward him. The shadows on the wall stretched long. And somewhere beneath the island, beneath the noise, beneath the sea itself, the curse inside Jack Sparrow listened. Let's see what death is willing to bargain. What if Jack Sparrow was evil Part 2? The name Davy Jones was not spoken loudly in Tortuga. Even in a town built on sin, where murder could be bought for less than a bottle of rum and a man could vanish between sunset and sunrise without anyone asking why, there were still names people feared. Davy Jones was one of them. Sailors crossed themselves when they heard it. Pirates lowered their voices. Captains pretended not to believe in him, then refused to sail through fog when the moon was hidden. The sea was full of stories about him. Some said he had once been a man. Some said he had loved a goddess and been ruined by it. Some said he carved out his own heart so he would never feel weakness again. Others claimed his ship, the Flying Dutchman, rose from beneath the waves to collect souls from dying vessels, dragging men into a fate worse than death. Jack Sparrow listened to every version. Not because he feared Davy Jones. Because every legend had a weakness hidden inside it. And Jack wanted that weakness. Tortuga had changed since the night Jack took it. On the surface, nothing looked different. The streets were still filthy. The tavern still shook with music and violence. Drunken pirates still stumbled into alleys, smugglers still whispered prices beneath broken lanterns, and the harbor still smelled of salt, blood, gunpowder, and rot. But beneath the madness, there was order. Jack's order. Every ship that entered Tortuga was watched. Every captain who came ashore was judged before he reached the tavern doors. Every cargo hold was counted. Every rumor was collected. Every lie was weighed. Men believed Tortuga was free because Jack allowed them to believe it. They believed they were still wild because Jack did not bother to put chains on their wrists. He had learned something important. Visible chains made men rebel. Invisible chains made them comfortable. From the balcony of the estate he had stolen from Captain Rook, Jack watched his kingdom breathe below him. Lanterns glowed across the harbor. Black sails moved in the dark. Somewhere in the distance, a man screamed, then the scream became laughter, then music swallowed it whole. Jack stood alone with a map spread across the table behind him. On it were marked British patrol routes, pirate havens, supply lines, ports of execution, secret reefs, and places no sane sailor would visit. But his eyes returned again and again to one name written in dark ink near the edge of the map. Davy Jones. There were other marks around it. Old sightings. Ships lost. Survivors found mad. Waters where compasses spun uselessly. Places where bells had been heard beneath the sea. Jack held a coin between his fingers. Not the Aztec gold itself. He would never be foolish enough to carry one of those openly. This was a lesser piece of treasure taken from Isla de Muerta, stained faintly from the blood spilled in the cave. He turned it slowly, watching candlelight crawl across its surface. The curse inside him had grown quieter in the weeks since Isla de Muerta. Not weaker. Never weaker. It had become part of him. At first, he had felt it like a storm under his skin. Now it was deeper. Colder. It waited behind his thoughts. It moved with his desires. When he walked through moonlight, he could feel death reveal itself beneath his flesh, but the sight no longer disturbed him. If anything, he enjoyed the honesty of it. Men wore skin to hide what they were. The curse simply showed the truth. A knock came at the door. Jack did not turn around. "Enter." The door opened, and Mr. Gibbs stepped inside. Gibbs had become useful. He was loyal enough to trust with small truths and frightened enough not to ask for larger ones. Jack had not told him what happened at Isla de Muerta. No one knew that. But Gibbs had seen enough since then to understand that Captain Jack Sparrow had changed, and whatever warmth the man once carried had been replaced by something sharp and hungry. "You sent for me, Captain." Jack smiled faintly at the map. "There's a ship coming into harbor." Gibbs frowned. "There are always ships coming into harbor. This one carries a man who survived the Dutchman." That silenced him. Gibbs stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Survived?" "Apparently. No one survives the Dutchman unless Jones allows it." Jack turned at last. "Exactly." The survivor arrived before midnight. He was dragged into Jack's estate by two men who looked uncomfortable touching him. He was thin, soaked in seawater though the night was dry, and shaking so violently that his teeth clicked together. Barnacles clung to his coat. His lips were cracked. His eyes were wide and empty, the eyes of a man who had seen something his mind could not survive. Jack sat at the far end of the room, boots on the table, fingers loosely wrapped around a bottle of rum. "Name," Jack said. The man stared at him. Jack waited. The man swallowed. "Thomas Reed." "Occupation?" "Deckhand." "Former occupation?" The man looked confused. Jack leaned forward slightly. "You were on a ship before you became a ghost with shoes." "Which ship?" "The Mary Saint." "British?" The man nodded. Jack's smile grew. That was useful. "And Davy Jones took her?" The deckhand began to shake harder. The room seemed colder after the name was spoken. "It came from below," Thomas whispered. "No wind. No warning. The water just opened. We heard bells first. Not above us. Below. Then the ship came up out of the sea like hell had learned to float." Gibbs crossed himself. Jack watched the man carefully. "Go on." The captain ordered fire. Cannons hit it. I saw holes tear through the hull, but it kept coming. The men aboard it weren't men. Not anymore. They had faces like fish, shells in their skin, claws, tentacles, things growing out of them. "And him?" Thomas stopped. Jack lowered the bottle. "Him?" The deckhand's eyes filled with tears. "Jones." No one in the room moved. Thomas stared at the floor as if he could still see the deck beneath his feet. He walked through the smoke. Cannon fire all around him. Men screaming. He looked bored. Like he had done it 1,000 times. He asked our captain if he feared death. Our captain spat at him. Thomas gave a broken laugh. Jones smiled. Jack's eye sharpened. What did he want? "Men," Thomas said. "Souls. Service." He gave them a choice. Die then or serve aboard the Dutchman for 100 years. "And you?" Thomas looked up. "He let me go." Jack's expression did not change. "Why?" "To carry a message." The candle flames flickered. Gibbs stiffened. Jack slowly lowered his boots from the table and stood. Thomas reached into his soaked coat with trembling hands. The men around him drew pistols at once, but Jack raised one hand and stopped them. The deckhand pulled out a small object wrapped in black cloth. He placed it on the table. No one touched it. Jack stepped closer and unfolded the cloth. Inside was a piece of carved bone marked with a symbol burned black into the surface. A warning. Jack did not recognize the writing, but he recognized the intention behind it. Possession. Claim. Debt. Thomas spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. He said the sea remembers all bargains. Jack stared at the symbol. For the first time in a long while, the curse inside him moved uneasily. Not with fear. With recognition. Jack's smile slowly returned. Did he now? Thomas began backing away. I delivered it. I did what he asked. Please. Let me leave. Jack looked at him. The room waited. Then Jack nodded. Of course. Relief flashed across the deckhand's face. He turned toward the door. Jack drew his pistol and shot him in the back. The sound thundered through the room. Thomas fell forward onto the floor and did not move. Gibbs stared in horror. Jack placed the pistol back into his belt. Dead men carry messages poorly. No one spoke. Jack picked up the carved bone and turned it between his fingers. Davy Jones had sent a warning. That meant Jones knew Jack was moving. Or at least suspected it. Good. A legend that could be made to notice him could be made to react. And anything that reacted could be trapped. By morning, Jack had given orders across Tortuga. No one was to speak of the dead British deckhand. The body was weighed down and dropped into deep water before sunrise. The men who had brought him in were paid generously, then assigned to different ships sailing in opposite directions. Any rumor that remained was twisted into something more useful. A British survivor had come to Tortuga. He had claimed that Davy Jones was hunting British ships. He had accused the Crown of hiding ancient bargains with monsters beneath the sea. By noon, half the town believed it. By sunset, smugglers carried the rumor beyond Tortuga. By the next week, it had reached British ears. Jack did not simply want Davy Jones. He wanted the British frightened of him too. Fear was a net. The wider it spread, the more things it caught. The war between pirates and the British grew uglier. The Crown sent heavier ships. Forts doubled their guns. Governors demanded public hangings. British captains began escorting convoys with entire squadrons. They believed they were tightening their grip on the Caribbean. But Jack wanted them concentrated. A scattered enemy was difficult to break. A proud enemy marching in formation was far easier to lead into a grave. He began feeding information through spies, prostitutes, tavern keepers, traitors, and desperate men who believed they were selling secrets to the highest bidder. Some of the information was true. Most of it was not. But every lie was shaped with care. A pirate fleet gathering south of Cuba. A hidden powder store near Port Royal. A Brethren Court messenger carrying war plans. A cursed ship attacking British vessels near the Devil's Triangle. The British chased every shadow. And every shadow pulled them farther from where they should have been looking. Jack sailed often during those months. The Black Pearl moved like a phantom between islands, striking where no one expected and vanishing before fleets could answer. Some nights, Jack attacked British supply ships. Other nights, he allowed British vessels to escape with false information. Sometimes he left survivors. Sometimes he left none. And sometimes, when the moon was full and the deck was empty, he stood beneath its light and looked down at his skeletal hands. The curse had stripped illusion away from him. Bone beneath skin. Death beneath charm. Immortality beneath a pirate's coat. He flexed his fingers and smiled. Most cursed men would have searched for a way to undo it. Jack searched for ways to improve it. But even power had limits, and Jack hated limits more than he hated enemies. The curse of the Aztec Gold made him difficult to kill, perhaps impossible by ordinary means, but it also chained him to the treasure. It took pleasure from the world. Rum dulled. Food turned meaningless. Warmth became distant. The touch of life itself became something he could remember but not fully feel. He would not accept that forever. Davy Jones had found another kind of immortality. A heart removed from the body. A ship bound to the dead. A crew shaped by the sea itself. A duty that became a curse. Jack wanted to understand it. Then he wanted to own it. One night, far from Tortuga, the Black Pearl drifted through fog so thick the lanterns barely pierced it. The crew had gone quiet. Even the newest men, who did not yet understand all of Jack's rules, knew enough not to speak when the captain was listening to the sea. Gibbs stood near the wheel, nervous. "There's no wind," he muttered. Jack stood at the bow. "I noticed." "No current either." "I noticed that too." "Then perhaps we should turn back." Jack looked over his shoulder. Gibbs immediately regretted speaking. The water around the Pearl was unnaturally still. The fog pressed in close, curling over the deck like fingers. Somewhere far away, a bell rang once. Gibbs went pale. Then it rang again. This time closer. The crew began looking around. A third bell echoed beneath the water. Jack smiled. "There you are." The sea exploded. The Flying Dutchman rose from beneath the waves in a storm of black water and rotten wood. Its hull broke the surface like a corpse being dragged from a grave. Seaweed hung from its sides. Barnacles covered its cannons. Its sails were torn and dark, moving though there was no wind. The crew emerged through the mist, half men and half nightmare, their bodies twisted by years of service beneath the sea. The Black Pearl's crew recoiled in horror. Jack did not move. The Dutchman turned slowly until its broadside faced the Pearl. Cannon stared through the fog. Then Davy Jones appeared. He stepped onto the deck of his ship like the sea itself had given him permission to exist. Tentacles shifted beneath his hat where a beard should have been. One arm ended in a crab-like claw. His eyes carried the cold exhaustion of something that had outlived mercy. Jack looked at him. Davy Jones looked back. For a long moment, neither captain spoke. Then Jones' voice rolled through the fog. "Jack Sparrow." Jack placed a hand over his heart and bowed slightly. "Captain Jack Sparrow, if we're being respectful." The crew of the Pearl stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Davy Jones did not smile. "You received my message." "I did." "Poor messenger, though." "Terrible posture." "Worse conversation." Jones' eyes darkened. "You have been stirring waters that do not belong to you." Jack tilted his head. "That depends greatly on who survives to write the ownership down." The Dutchman's crew shifted. The Pearl's crew gripped their weapons. The air tightened. Davy Jones stepped closer to the edge of his deck. "You think yourself clever. You think war and lies make you powerful. But the sea is older than your tricks." Jack's smile thinned. "And yet here you are, rising out of it to speak with me." Jones studied him. Then his gaze sharpened. He saw something. The curse. Perhaps not all of it. Perhaps not the secret of Isla de Muerta. But Davy Jones had lived too long and dealt with too many cursed men not to smell unnatural power when it stood before him. "What have you done?" Jones asked. Jack spread his arms slightly. "Improved." Jones' expression twisted with disgust. "You carry death on you. Most pirates do." "Not like that." Jack's eyes glinted beneath the moonlight. "No. Not like that." For the first time, Davy Jones looked almost interested. The fog moved around both ships as if the sea itself had leaned closer to listen. "You stole something," Jones said. Jack said nothing. "You tasted a curse and mistook it for freedom." Jack laughed softly. "That sounds personal." Jones' claw tightened against the rail of the Dutchman. "Curses always collect what they are owed." "Then perhaps I'll buy the debt." "You cannot bargain your way out of every cage," Jack Sparrow. Jack stepped forward. No. But I can usually make someone else stand in it for me. Jones stared at him for a long time. Then he gave a low, terrible laugh. There it is. The truth beneath all that charm. You are emptier than you pretend. Jack's smile vanished. For a heartbeat, the mask dropped. The crew of the Pearl felt it. Even from behind him, they sensed the change. The air around their captain grew colder. When Jack spoke again, his voice was quiet. Careful. Davy Jones leaned forward. Or what? Jack slowly smiled again, but this time there was no humor in it. Or I start wondering whether that heart of yours still beats loudly enough to find. The fog seemed to freeze. Davy Jones' face hardened. The crew of the Dutchman snarled. Gibbs whispered, Jack. Jack did not look away from Jones. There it was. The weakness beneath the legend. The heart. Davy Jones could threaten with the sea, with death, with monsters and curses and a ship that could not be our Trun. But mention the heart, and something inside him changed. A flicker. A wound. A fear buried beneath centuries. Jack had not found the heart. Not yet. But now he knew the wound was real. Jones lifted his claw. The Dutchman's cannons rolled into place. Jack raised one finger. Before we make this dramatic, you should know something. Jones' eyes narrowed. Jack reached into his coat and removed a sealed British naval dispatch. Gibbs blinked. He had not known Jack carried it. No one had. Jack held it up. The British have been asking questions about you. Jones said nothing. Unkind questions. Strategic questions. Questions involving priests, old maps, chains, and ways of making immortal things less so. Davy Jones watched him carefully now. Jack tossed the dispatch across the gap. It landed on the wet deck of the Dutchman. One of Jones' crew picked it up and brought it to him. Jones broke the seal and read. His expression did not change much. But Jack saw enough. The dispatch was real, mostly. The British had been gathering stories of the Dutchman. They had been searching for patterns in missing ships. They had not yet known what to do with the information. Jack had helped them along. He had added words. Adjusted names. Inserted references to the heart. Not enough to look like a forged threat from him. Enough to make Jones believe the British had begun sniffing near the truth. Jones lowered the paper. You expect me to believe the Crown understands what I am? No, Jack said. I expect you to believe they're arrogant enough to try. That landed. Because no matter how old Davy Jones was, no matter how terrifying, he knew the nature of men with flags and empires. They did not need to understand a thing to believe they could own it. Jack leaned on the rail. The British are hunting pirates. Pirates are hunting British. Everyone is wonderfully upset. But while the world is distracted, some very ambitious men in very clean uniforms have begun asking how one might control the Flying Dutchman. Jones' eyes burned. Jack continued. I thought you should know. Out of kindness. Out of professional courtesy. Jones laughed again, but this time there was no amusement. You want something. Of course I want something. I'm awake. What? Jack looked at the Dutchman. Its crew. Its cannons. Its rotting power. Its impossible presence. Then he looked back at Jones. A partnership? Gibbs looked as if he might faint. Davy Jones stared at Jack, then began to laugh louder. The sound rolled across the fog like thunder under the sea. You dare offer me partnership? I do. You are a pirate sitting on borrowed curses and stolen lies. Jack's eyes narrowed. And you are a ferryman with a missing heart and a crew of damp tragedies. Shall we continue insulting each other, or shall we make use of the fact that we both dislike the British? Jones stopped laughing. The sea grew quiet again. Jack had no intention of truly serving beside Davy Jones. But partnership was a door. A door led to trust. Trust led to access. Access led to the heart. Davy Jones studied him for a long time. "You are dangerous," Jones said. Jack smiled. "I try." "No. You are worse than dangerous. Dangerous men at least know when they are standing at the edge of the abyss." Jack's smile widened. "And what do I do?" Jones' eyes darkened. "You look over the edge and wonder what the abyss is hiding from you." For a moment, Jack felt something close to respect. Not friendship. Never that. Recognition. Davy Jones was not a fool. That made him harder to use. Harder, but not impossible. Before either captain could speak again, a sound split the fog. Cannon fire. Not from the Dutchman. Not from the Pearl. A shot screamed through the mist and struck the water between both ships, throwing spray into the air. Then another. The fog shifted, revealing lanterns in the distance. British warships. 3 of them. No. 5. Their silhouettes appeared through the mist, sails full despite the dead air, guns already flashing. Gibbs shouted orders. The Pearl's crew scrambled. The Dutchman's crew roared. Davy Jones turned toward the approaching ships with fury in his eyes. Jack did not look surprised. Because he was not. He had arranged this. Not perfectly. The sea was never perfect. Men were never perfect. But he had made sure the British believed a pirate gathering would happen in these waters. He had made sure certain patrol routes shifted. He had made sure the fog would hide more than one monster tonight. Now the British had found the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman together. Exactly as Jack wanted. Davy Jones turned back toward him. His expression made it clear he understood. Jack grinned. "Seems your clean uniformed friends arrived sooner than expected. You brought them here." "I encouraged them." The Dutchman shook as another cannonball struck its side. Jones' rage deepened. Jack pointed toward the British fleet. "They came hunting legends. Shall we disappoint them?" For 1 second, Davy Jones looked as if he might turn the Dutchman's guns on the Pearl instead. Then a British cannonball tore through the Dutchman's rigging. Jones snarled. The decision was made. The Flying Dutchman turned toward the British fleet. The Black Pearl moved beside it. And together, beneath fog and moonlight, the 2 most feared ships in the Caribbean sailed into battle. The British had expected pirates. They had not expected death to rise from the sea. The first warship fired a full broadside into the Dutchman. Wood exploded. Rotting planks shattered. Smoke swallowed the deck. For a moment, the British cheered. Then the Dutchman emerged from the smoke, still moving. Its cannons fired. The British ship split open like a cracked rib. Men screamed as fire and splinters filled the night. The Black Pearl swept around the second ship, faster than anything its size should have been. Jack stood at the helm laughing as cannon fire roared from his deck. Chains tore through sails. Grape-shot shredded soldiers lined along the rail. The Pearl moved through the battlefield like a blade, cutting, turning, vanishing into fog, then appearing again where the enemy was weakest. But Jack was not merely fighting. He was watching. Watching Jones give orders. Watching the Dutchman respond. Watching the crew obey. Watching how fear moved through the sea around him. Power always had patterns. Even monstrous power. The British tried to form a line. Jack broke it. The Dutchman dived beneath the water and emerged beside the third ship, crushing its hull against its own weight. Men fell screaming into the sea, only to be dragged under by things beneath the surface. The fourth ship attempted to flee. Jack allowed it to run. Then he signaled the Pearl to pursue slowly. Gibbs stared at him. "Captain," We can catch them. I know. Then why aren't we? Jack watched the fleeing ship. Because frightened men travel faster than dead ones. The ship escaped into the fog carrying survivors, witnesses, and a story no sane officer would believe until it was too late. The British would now know Davy Jones was real. They would know the Flying Dutchman could be found. They would know Jack Sparrow had stood beside it. And every powerful man in the Crown would begin asking the same question. Can it be controlled? Jack smiled to himself. Let them ask. Questions were hooks. And Jack had just thrown one into the mouth of an empire. By the time the battle ended, burning wreckage covered the sea. Bodies floated between shattered wood. The fog glowed orange from distant fire. The Black Pearl drifted near the Dutchman, both ships scarred but alive. Davy Jones stood on his deck, staring at Jack. The anger had not left him. But neither had the thought Jack had planted. The British were a threat. Jack was a problem. But perhaps, for now, he was also useful. Jones spoke across the water. This changes nothing. Jack leaned against the rail. It changes everything. You think one battle makes us allies? No. I think one battle makes the British curious. Curiosity makes them reckless. Recklessness makes them predictable. Jones' eyes narrowed. And you? Jack smiled. I am rarely predictable. Jones turned away. The Dutchman's crew began moving. The sea beneath the ship darkened, preparing to swallow it again. Before it vanished, Jones looked back once. Keep chasing my heart, Jack Sparrow, and you will find more than you can carry. Jack's smile did not fade. I've always had excellent balance. The Flying Dutchman sank beneath the waves, disappearing into black water until only ripples remained. The crew of the Black Pearl stood in silence. No one cheered. No one laughed. They had won, but victory felt wrong. They had fought beside something that should not exist, under a captain who had arranged the whole nightmare without telling them. Even the hardest men aboard the Pearl looked at Jack differently now. Jack noticed. Good. Respect was useful. Fear was better. He turned from the rail. Set course for Tortuga. Gibbs hesitated. And the British survivor ship? Jack looked toward the direction it had fled. Let them run. They'll tell everyone. Jack smiled. That is the idea. The Pearl returned to Tortuga under a blood-colored dawn. By then, word had already begun to move faster than the ship itself. The escaped British vessel had reached a nearby outpost, half-burned and full of terrified men speaking of a cursed ship, of sea monsters, of Jack Sparrow standing with Davy Jones in the fog. The British authorities did exactly what Jack expected. They denied it publicly. Then panicked privately. Governors sent letters. Admirals demanded reports. Scholars were dragged from old libraries. Prisoners were questioned. Pirates were tortured for rumors. Anyone who had ever heard the name Davy Jones suddenly became valuable. And in Tortuga, Jack watched the British fear grow from a distance. The pirate lords believed the battle proved Jack was chosen by fortune. The smugglers believed he had made Davy Jones bow. The common pirates believed he had walked beside death and returned smiling. Every version served him. His legend grew darker. And so did his hunger. In the weeks that followed, Jack began searching for the heart in earnest. He sent thieves into British archives. He paid divers to recover wreckage from ships lost near strange waters. He questioned old captains. He tortured men who claimed to know songs about Jones. He bought maps from madmen and killed them after to keep the price exclusive. Piece by piece, the story formed. Davy Jones had loved Calypso. He had carved out his heart. The heart was locked away. The key was kept close. The chest could command him. Jack sat alone in his estate when the final piece came to him. A sailor from Singapore. An old woman from a Spanish prison. A priest who had once heard confession from a dying pirate. 3 sources. 3 different stories. 1 matching detail. The key. Davy Jones carried it with him. Jack leaned back in his chair and laughed softly. Of course he did. Men always kept their weaknesses close while pretending they were protecting them. The door opened. Gibbs stepped inside. "Captain." Jack looked up. "There's trouble." "There's always trouble." "Not like this." Gibbs placed a sealed letter on the table. The wax bore the mark of the Brethren Court. Jack stared at it. He had expected this too, though perhaps not so soon. He broke the seal. The message was short. The court demanded his presence. Shipwreck Cove. Immediately. Jack read it twice, then set it down. Gibbs watched him carefully. "What do they want?" Jack smiled. "They want to know if I've become too powerful." Gibbs shifted uncomfortably. "And have you?" Jack stood and walked to the window. Outside, Tortuga roared with life. His life. His town. His weapon. Below, men drank to his name. Captains paid his tribute. Messengers carried his lies. Ships moved because he allowed them to move. He could ignore the court. He could prepare for them. He could kill the messenger and claim the letter never arrived. But no. Not yet. The Brethren Court still had uses. Pirate lords commanded fleets, routes, secrets, old laws, and ancient objects of power. If Jack moved too quickly, they would unite against him. If he moved carefully, they would destroy themselves trying to understand what he had become. Jack turned back from the window. "We sail for Shipwreck Cove." Gibbs looked relieved for half a second. Then Jack added, "And bring the men who don't ask questions." The relief vanished. That night, before the Pearl departed, Jack went alone beneath the estate. Few knew Rook's old home had tunnels under it. Fewer knew Jack had expanded them. Beneath the stone floors, beneath the storage rooms, beneath the old smuggler passages, there was a chamber lit by a single lantern. Inside it were things Jack did not show his crew. Maps. Bones. Relics. British dispatches. Pieces of cursed treasure. Names written in blood and ink. At the center of the room sat a small locked chest. Not the dead man's chest. Not yet. This one was Jack's. He opened it and removed the hidden fragment of the Isla de Muerta map. The only surviving clue to where he had buried the true Aztec gold. He held it for a long moment, feeling the curse stir inside him as if recognizing its anchor. He then placed beside it the carved bone Davy Jones had sent. 2 curses. 2 paths to immortality. 2 powers that thought they could own men. Jack's eyes darkened. "No," he whispered. His voice was calm, but the chamber seemed to shrink around it. "No one owns Captain Jack Sparrow." He closed the chest. Then he took a knife and carved one more mark into the table. A heart. Not because he had it. Because soon he would. The Black Pearl sailed before dawn. As Tortuga faded behind him, Jack stood at the helm and watched the horizon. The wind moved through his hair. The sea glittered cold and endless ahead. Somewhere beneath those waters, Davy Jones guarded his key. Somewhere across the sea, the British sharpened their hunger for impossible power. Somewhere in Shipwreck Cove, the Brethren Court waited to judge whether Jack Sparrow was still one of them. Jack smiled. Let them all wait. Let them gather in their courts, their forts, their ships, and their graves. He would go to them. He would lie to them. He would smile. And when the time came, he would take from each of them exactly what he needed. Because Jack Sparrow had once wanted freedom. Now he understood the truth. Freedom was too small a dream. A free man could still be hunted. A free man could still be betrayed. A free man could still be forgotten. But a feared man became a law of nature. And Jack was no longer trying to escape the world. He was teaching the world to kneel. The Pearl cut through the morning mist toward Shipwreck Cove, its black sails raised like wings over the water. Behind Jack, his crew whispered. Ahead of him, the pirate lords waited. Below him, the sea carried secrets. And somewhere far beneath the waves, in the darkness where dead men served and monsters listened, Davy Jones felt something he had not felt in centuries. Not fear. Not yet. But the beginning of it. What if Jack Sparrow was evil? Part 3. Shipwreck Cove had never felt safe, but now it felt like a grave pretending to be a kingdom. The Black Pearl cut through the dark water beneath cliffs of broken stone, her sails black against a sky bruised purple by the dying evening. Fires burned inside the cove, lanterns hanging from wrecked ships, old masts, wooden bridges, and the bones of vessels that had once belonged to captains too proud to die quietly. Pirates filled the docks. Not common sailors this time. Not drunken fools from Tortuga. These were captains. Killers. Lords of distant waters. Men and women who had carved their names into the sea through blood, betrayal, gold, and cannon fire. Every one of them had heard the stories. Every one of them had heard what Jack Sparrow had become. Some believed he was a hero of the pirate war. Some believed he was cursed. Some believed he had made a bargain with Davy Jones. Some believed he had become worse than both the British and the monsters beneath the waves. Jack intended to let them keep guessing. He stepped onto the dock with Gibbs behind him and the Pearl's crew moving in silence. No one cheered. No one mocked him. Even the pirates who once would have shouted insults from the tavern balconies only watched from a distance, hands close to pistols, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Jack smiled at them all. The more afraid they were, the easier they became. Inside the great hall of Shipwreck Cove, the Brethren Court waited. Candles burned across long tables. Maps of the world lay beneath knives, cups, coins, and old relics. The pirate lords sat in a broken circle, each one wearing pride-like armor. They had summoned Jack because they feared him, but none of them would admit that. So they hid behind words like concern, balance, tradition, and law. Pirate law. Jack almost laughed at the thought. A thief's law was only a knife with nicer words. He entered the chamber slowly, boots echoing against the wood. Every head turned. Captain Teague sat in shadow near the far end, silent and watching. His eyes followed Jack with a coldness that most men would have mistaken for calm. Jack knew better. Teague had always been able to see deeper than most. Not everything. Never everything. But enough to be dangerous. One of the pirate lords rose. You were summoned, Jack Sparrow. Jack placed a hand over his heart and bowed slightly. And here I am. How fortunate for all of you. No one laughed. Jack straightened. The pirate lord's mouth tightened. There are questions that need answering. There usually are. You took Tortuga. Jack tilted his head. Tortuga was lying about, really. You made yourself ruler. Ruler is such an ugly word. I prefer concerned caretaker. A few pirates shifted uncomfortably. Another lord slammed his fist against the table. You stand accused of drawing Davy Jones into pirate war. Jack's smile faded only slightly. Accused by whom? By survivors. By spies. By British reports. By whispers that follow every ship you touch. Jack looked around the room. Whispers are unreliable things. That is why people enjoy them. The First Lord leaned forward. Did you stand beside the Flying Dutchman in battle? Jack did not answer at once. He let the silence grow. Then he smiled. Yes. The room erupted. Pirate lords shouted over each other. Some called him reckless. Some called him traitor. Some demanded to know what bargain had been struck. Others insisted Davy Jones could not be trusted, that the Dutchman belonged to no side but its own, that Jack had invited death into waters already burning with war. Jack listened without blinking. They thought they were judging him. They did not understand. He had come to judge them. When the shouting grew loud enough, Teague finally spoke. Enough. The word cut through the chamber. The room quieted. Teague's eyes stayed on Jack. What are you playing at, Jackie? There it was. Not captain. Not lord. Not king. Jackie. A small name from an old life. Jack hated how easily it found him. He smiled anyway. Winning. Teague did not smile back. At what cost? Jack slowly turned his head, looking at every pirate lord in the chamber. Cost is what weak men complain about after stronger men make history. That silenced them. For one brief second, they all saw it. The thing beneath the charm. The darkness beneath the coat, beads, smile, and swagger. Not the ridiculous Jack Sparrow they had known. Not the clever survivor. Not the man who escaped death because luck fancied him. Something colder. Something that had decided the world was too small unless it belonged to him. Teague stood. You are forgetting who you are. Jack's eyes sharpened. No, he said softly. I am remembering. The room chilled. A hand moved toward a pistol. Jack saw it. Of course he saw it. But before the weapon could be drawn, the doors behind the court burst open. A pirate messenger stumbled inside, soaked in seawater and blood. His face was pale, eyes wild. The British, he gasped. They've entered the outer channel. The room exploded again. Captains rose. Chairs scraped against wood. Swords were drawn. Men shouted orders before anyone knew what was happening. The messenger shook his head. No. Not just British. He swallowed hard. The Dutchman is with them. Silence fell harder than any cannon shot. Jack turned slowly. For the first time, his smile returned with true pleasure. Davy Jones had come. Good. Everything was moving. Outside, Shipwreck Cove erupted into chaos. Pirates ran for their ships. Bells rang from the cliffs. Cannons were dragged into position. Lanterns swung wildly as men shouted across bridges and decks. The Brethren Court scattered from its hall like rats fleeing a flood, every lord rushing to protect their own vessel, their own crew, their own pride. Jack walked. Not ran. Walked. The Pearl waited for him below, black sails already being prepared. Gibbs hurried at his side, pale with fear. Captain, if Jones is with the British. He isn't with them. Gibbs stared at him. Then why is he here? Jack looked toward the mouth of the cove, where distant thunder was beginning to roll across the water. Because I made him angry enough to forget he was clever. The first cannon fired. A British warship emerged through the outer mist, followed by another, then another. Their flag snapped in the wind, red and white cutting through the dark like wounds. Behind them, half-submerged and monstrous, came the Flying Dutchman. But something was wrong. The Dutchman did not sail behind the British like an ally. It stalked them. The British had followed rumors. They had followed fear. They had followed forged messages and stolen maps planted carefully across the war. They believed Shipwreck Cove was exposed. They believed the pirate lords had gathered in one place. They believed that if they struck now, they could cripple piracy forever. And Davy Jones had followed them. Not because he served them. Because he knew Jack had arranged the path. Now all the pieces had arrived in one place. The British wanted to destroy the pirates. The pirates wanted to survive. Davy Jones wanted Jack. And Jack wanted the heart. The Black Pearl moved into the cove's inner water as cannon fire tore the night apart. British ships hammered the cliffs. Pirate vessels answered from hidden positions, guns flashing from behind wrecked hulls and stone towers. Smoke filled the harbor. Fire spread across the water. Men screamed from decks and bridges as splinters flew through the air. The Flying Dutchman ignored most of it. It came straight for the Pearl. Jack stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the monstrous ship. Davy Jones appeared on the Dutchman's deck, tentacles writhing, claw gripping the rail. Even through the smoke, Jack could feel his hatred. Jones had seen the trap too late. But he had come anyway. Pride did that to men. Even immortal ones. The Dutchman's cannons turned. Gibbs shouted, "Hard to starboard." Jack did not move. "Captain!" "Wait." The cannons fired. At the last second, Jack spun the wheel. The Pearl slid across the water as if dragged by fate itself. Cannonballs screamed past, tearing through rigging and smashing into the cove wall behind them. Stone exploded. Pirates on the cliffs vanished in dust and fire. Jack laughed. The Pearl cut close to a British frigate and fired into its side, using the ship as cover while the Dutchman advanced. The British captain tried to turn guns on Jack, but before he could, the Dutchman rammed through the smoke and crushed the frigate against the rocks. Men fell into the water. The Dutchman's crew dragged them under. Jack watched Jones. Jones watched Jack. There was no battlefield between them anymore. Only a path. "Bring us alongside," Jack said. Gibbs stared at him like he had gone mad. Alongside the Dutchman. Jack looked at him. Gibbs swallowed. "I, Captain." The Pearl turned sharply, moving through smoke and wreckage. Cannon fire thundered around them. A mast collapsed nearby, smashing into the sea. A burning pirate ship drifted across their path, forcing Jack to swing the Pearl around it so close the flames kissed the edge of his coat. Then the Dutchman was beside them. Two legends running parallel through hell. Grappling hooks flew from the Pearl. The Dutchman's crew answered with roars. Boards slammed between decks. The crews collided. Steel rang. Pistols fired. Monsters clawed into men. Pirates hacked at sea-rotted limbs. The deck became a storm of blood, smoke, rain, and splintered wood. Jack crossed onto the Flying Dutchman with his sword in one hand and pistol in the other. Davy Jones waited for him. No jokes this time. No theater. No mask. The two captains faced each other as the battle raged around them. Jones spoke first. "You think yourself beyond consequence." Jack smiled. "I think consequence has had a very poor time keeping up with me." Jones stepped forward. "You poisoned the British with lies. You poisoned the pirates with ambition. You dragged the sea into your little war." Jack tilted his head. "My war." The smile vanished. "No, Jones. The war was always there. I simply taught it where to look." Jones drew his blade. "You should have stayed afraid of death." Jack raised his sword. "I outgrew it." They clashed. Jones was stronger. Far stronger. Every blow from his blade carried the weight of centuries, of storms, of drowned souls, of rage that had never healed. Jack could not meet him with brute force, so he did what he always did. He cheated. He slipped. Twisted. Ducking beneath strikes. Using ropes, broken rails, fallen bodies, cannon smoke, and chaos itself as weapons. Jones drove him backward across the deck, smashing through a barrel, splitting wood where Jack's head had been a heartbeat earlier. Jack fired his pistol. The shot struck Jones in the chest. Jones barely moved. Jack sighed. "Worth a try." Jones struck him hard enough to throw him across the deck. Jack hit the wood, rolled, and rose laughing, though the impact would have broken an ordinary man. The curse inside him absorbed the pain differently now. It did not make him invincible to everything, but it made suffering feel distant, like something happening to someone else. Jones saw that. His eyes narrowed. "The Aztec curse," he growled. Jack's smile sharpened. "Caught up, have we?" Jones' face twisted with disgust. "You fool. You chained yourself to dead gold." Jack stepped closer. "And you chained yourself to a dead heart. That did it." Jones attacked with fury. Their blades collided again and again, sparks flashing in the rain. Around them, the battle between pirates, monsters, and British soldiers folded into one massive nightmare. A British boarding party had reached the Pearl. Dutchman crew tore them apart. Pirates fired into both sides. The cove burned. And in the middle of it all, Jack waited. He had no intention of beating Davy Jones fairly. That would have been stupid. He only needed Jones angry. Anger narrowed the world. Anger made hands careless. Anger made a man forget what he guarded. Jones lunged. Jack stepped aside, grabbed a hanging rope, swung around a broken mast, and landed behind him. Jones turned, but Jack was already moving. His hand flashed toward Jones' belt. Not for a weapon. For the key. Jones realized too late. His claw snapped toward Jack's arm, catching his sleeve and tearing it open, but Jack twisted free with the key in his hand. For one moment, the world seemed to pause. Davy Jones stared at the empty place where the key had been. Jack held it up between two fingers. "Looking for this?" Jones roared. The sound shook the deck. Jack ran. Not away. Toward the lower decks. The Dutchman was a maze of rot, shadow, chains, and wet wood. Jack moved through it with impossible speed, following a path he had studied from stolen drawings, madman stories, and every whisper he had gathered over months. Behind him, Jones crashed through the ship like a storm wearing flesh. "Jack Sparrow!" Jack grinned as he ran. There were few sounds more satisfying than a powerful enemy losing patience. He reached the chamber. The chest waited there. The dead man's chest. Dark wood. Iron bands. Ancient lock. It sat beneath hanging chains in a room that smelled of salt, blood, and old grief. For the first time since touching the Aztec gold, Jack felt something close to reverence. Not because the chest was sacred. Because it was useful. He slid the key into the lock. Davy Jones appeared at the doorway. "Do not." Jack looked back. Jones' voice was no longer only rage. There was fear in it now. Small. Buried. But real. Jack smiled. "There you are." He turned the key. The lock opened. Inside the chest lay the heart of Davy Jones. It was ugly. Wet. Still beating. Each pulse filled the room with a sound that seemed too human for something belonging to a monster. Jack stared at it, fascinated. So much power. So much legend. So much fear. And at the center of it all, just meat in a box. Jones stepped into the room slowly. "Jack!" No captain now. No insult. Just the name. Jack looked at him. Jones' eyes were dark with hatred, but beneath it was something worse. Memory. Pain. Love. Weakness. Jack understood in that moment why Jones had cut his heart out. Not to become stronger. To escape the one thing that had made him weak. Jack almost pitied him. Almost. Then he drew his sword. Jones lunged. Jack stabbed the heart. The scream that followed did not belong to any man. It tore through the Dutchman, through the cove, through the sea itself. The ship shook violently. Chains snapped from the ceiling. Water burst through cracks in the walls. Above them, the Dutchman's crew screamed as the curse binding them to Jones was ripped apart. Davy Jones staggered. His hand clutched at his chest, though there was nothing there to hold. Jack drove the blade deeper into the heart. Jones fell to his knees. For the first time, the captain of the Flying Dutchman looked truly mortal. Jack leaned close. Seems death was willing to bargain after all. Jones looked up at him with hatred burning through the last of his strength. You do not understand what you have taken. Jack smiled. I rarely do at first. Jones' body began to collapse inward, not merely dying but being claimed by the sea he had once ruled. His form cracked like old coral. The tentacles of his face curled and stiffened. His eyes remained fixed on Jack until the final second. Then Davy Jones was gone. The heart inside the chest stopped beating. For one breath, everything was silent. Then the Dutchman chose. The ship groaned. The walls bent. The sea pressed in from every side. Jack felt something seize him from within. Not the Aztec curse. Something older. A law. A position. A throne. The Flying Dutchman could not exist without a captain. The heart had been stabbed. The old captain was dead. The debt demanded a replacement. Jack's breath caught. Pain exploded through his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something fully. Not rum. Not warmth. Not pleasure. Pain. Real pain. He looked down as his chest tore open without a blade touching it. Not flesh alone, but something deeper. His heart was being claimed, pulled toward the chest by the ancient law of the Dutchman. Most men would have screamed. Jack laughed. Because even through the agony, he understood. The curse was trying to bind him. Trying to make him into another Davy Jones. Another servant. Another ferryman. Another captain chained to duty. No. Jack Sparrow served no curse. No sea. No dead god. No forgotten law. He staggered to the chest, blood soaking his shirt, the Aztec curse writhing inside him as the Dutchman's power wrapped around his soul. Two curses collided in one body. Deathless gold and death's own ship. One refused to let him die. The other demanded his heart as payment. Jack forced himself to stand over the chest. His own heart appeared inside it, beating beside the dead remains of Jones' power. Darker than a mortal heart. Changed by the Aztec curse. Wrapped in shadow and gold light, pulsing with a rhythm that sounded like cannon fire under the sea. The Dutchman tried to claim it. Jack would not let it claim him completely. With shaking hands, he reached into his coat and pulled out the hidden fragment of the Isla de Muerta map. The final clue to the Aztec Gold. The secret anchor of his first immortality. He pressed it against his own heart inside the chest. The room darkened. The Aztec curse answered. Gold light spread through the chest like veins. The Dutchman's ancient magic recoiled, then twisted, then fused with it. Jack gritted his teeth as something impossible began to form. Not a curse replacing a curse. A cage within a cage. His heart was no longer simply the heart of the Dutchman's captain. His soul was no longer simply bound to dead gold. Jack forced both powers into the chest. His heart. His soul. His death. His weakness. All locked away together. The chest slammed shut on its own. The lock twisted. The key turned black. And Jack Sparrow stopped dying. The pain vanished. He stood upright slowly. His torn chest closed. His blood stopped falling. His breath returned, though he no longer truly needed it. The Aztec curse settled inside him like a crown of cold fire. The Dutchman's power wrapped around him like a second shadow. Above, the battle stopped. The Flying Dutchman recognized its new captain. Every creature aboard felt it. Every chain. Every plank. Every cannon. Every drowned soul. The ship bowed without moving. Jack walked back to the upper deck. The rain had stopped. The cove was burning around him. British ships lay shattered. Pirate vessels drifted in smoke. Men from every side stared as Jack emerged from below, his coat torn, his face pale, but his smile alive and terrible. The Dutchman's crew turned toward him. One by one, they lowered their heads. The pirates aboard the Pearl saw it. The British saw it. The Brethren Court saw it from the cliffs. Jack Sparrow stood on the deck of the Flying Dutchman with the Black Pearl beside him, and the sea itself seemed to wait for his command. Gibbs stared up from the Pearl, unable to speak. Jack looked down at him. "Well then," he called, voice calm across the water. "That went rather well." No one laughed. Jack raised one hand. The Dutchman's cannons turned toward the remaining British ships. The Pearl's cannons followed. For the first time, the two ships moved together under one will. Jack's will. Fire. The night exploded. British ships broke apart under the combined fury of the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman. Cannonballs tore through hulls. The Dutchman vanished beneath the sea and rose beneath fleeing vessels, cracking them open from below. The Pearl moved through smoke like a blade, cutting off escape, striking sails, destroying rudders, trapping ships exactly where Jack wanted them. The British came to Shipwreck Cove to end piracy. Instead, they watched a new nightmare crown itself. When the last British ship tried to surrender, Jack allowed its white flag to rise. He let the men believe mercy had found them. Then he ordered the Dutchman to drag the ship beneath the waves. The sea swallowed it whole. Not one survivor was left to carry the story. Jack did not need survivors this time. The witnesses he wanted were already watching. The Brethren Court stood silent on the cliffs. The pirate lords who had summoned him, questioned him, judged him, and doubted him now stared at the impossible truth. Jack Sparrow had not allied with Davy Jones. He had replaced him. The Flying Dutchman belonged to him. The Black Pearl still belonged to him. Tortuga belonged to him. And now the war belonged to him too. The Pearl drew close to the Dutchman. Jack crossed back onto his first ship, and the moment his boots touched the deck, the crew stepped away from him without being ordered. Gibbs looked at him with a mixture of terror and grief. "Jack!" Jack turned his eyes on him. Gibbs corrected himself instantly. "Captain." Jack smiled. There it was. The proper word. Behind them, the Dutchman waited, silent and loyal, half sunk in the dark water like a monster kneeling before its master. Jack walked to the helm of the Pearl and placed his hand on the wheel. For a moment, he simply breathed in the smoke, salt, blood, and fear. He had done it. He had taken the heart. He had killed Davy Jones. He had become captain of the Flying Dutchman without surrendering the Black Pearl. And better than that, he had locked his own heart and soul inside the chest, binding both curses around himself until death could no longer find a way in. A man could be stabbed. A ship could be sunk. A body could be burned. But Jack Sparrow's death was no longer in his body. It was no longer in the gold alone. It was hidden inside the chest. And the chest could be hidden anywhere. That was the next problem. Power was never safe while another hand could touch it. Jack knew men. He knew pirates. He knew gods. He knew monsters. He knew that sooner or later, every secret became a treasure to someone. If the Brethren Court could find the chest, they would try to control him. If the British could find it, they would try to weaponize him. If some future fool heard the legend and believed himself clever, he would come hunting. Jack would not allow that. That very night, while Shipwreck Cove still burned and the pirate lords argued in fear over what they had witnessed, Jack vanished. Not from the cove. From certainty. The Black Pearl sailed east. The Flying Dutchman sank beneath the waves and followed below. No one knew which ship carried the chest. No one knew whether the chest remained above the water at all. Jack made sure of it. For 7 days and 7 nights, he sailed through waters that did not appear on maps. He crossed dead currents, silent reefs, storms that moved against the wind, and seas where the stars reflected incorrectly. The Pearl sailed by moonlight. The Dutchman moved beneath her like a shadow with teeth. The chest remained in Jack's cabin. Locked. Silent. Waiting. Sometimes, when the ship was quiet, Jack could hear his own heart beating inside it. Not in his chest. In the box. It should have disturbed him. Instead, it comforted him. A heart inside the body was a weakness. A heart inside a hidden chest was strategy. On the 8th night, Jack opened the chest. His heart pulsed within, wrapped in dark veins of Aztec gold and Dutchman shadow. Every beat echoed through both ships. The Pearl creaked in answer. The Dutchman groaned beneath the water. 2 vessels, 1 master. Jack stared at it for a long time. You and I, he whispered, are going to be very difficult to kill. Then he closed the chest again. He did not hide it on an island. That would be too obvious. He did not bury it in sand. Too simple. He did not sink it beneath ordinary water. Too predictable. Jack sailed to a place old sailors called the Hollow Depth. It was not a sea on any map. It was a wound in the ocean, a place where ships vanished but wreckage never surfaced, where compasses spun until the needles snapped, where whales refused to sing and birds turned away mid-flight. At the center of the hollow depth, the water turned perfectly still. The sky above had no stars. The moon vanished behind black cloud. Jack stood on the deck of the Flying Dutchman with the chest in his hands. The crew watched from a distance. They no longer looked at him as they had once looked at Jones. Jones had been their curse. Jack was something else. Something worse. A captain who had chosen the curse and then bent it around himself. The Dutchman lowered itself into the water until the deck was nearly level with the sea. Black waves lapped against Jack's boots. Gibbs had come with him from the Pearl, though he clearly wished he had not. "Captain," Gibbs said quietly, "are you certain this is wise?" Jack looked at the chest. "No." Gibbs blinked. Jack smiled. "That's what makes it interesting." The water ahead opened. Not parted. Opened. A circle of darkness appeared in the sea, deeper than any ocean trench, blacker than any night. From within came no sound. No wind. No movement. It was not a hole in the water. It was a place the world had forgotten to close. Jack stepped forward. The chest pulsed in his grip. For the first time, he felt resistance. Not from the Dutchman. Not from the Aztec curse. From his own heart. It did not want to be hidden. It wanted to stay near him. Alive things feared darkness. Jack's expression hardened. "You don't get a vote." He threw the chest into the hollow depth. It fell without sound. No splash. No echo. Nothing. The darkness swallowed it. For 1 second, Jack felt empty. Then the feeling changed. His body remained. His soul remained. His power remained. But somewhere far below the world, beyond maps, beyond ships, beyond the reach of pirates, kings, gods, and dead men, his heart continued to beat. Hidden. Protected. Untouchable. Jack smiled. The hollow depth closed. The sea became still again. Gibbs stared at the water. What happens if someone finds it? Jack turned to him slowly. The smile on his face was gentle. That made it terrifying. Then, Mr. Gibbs, we make sure there is no one left in the world who knows how to look. Gibbs said nothing. He had finally understood. Jack was not hiding the chest because he feared death. He was hiding it because he intended to remove the idea of death from his story completely. When the Pearl and the Dutchman returned to ordinary waters, the Caribbean was no longer the same. The British had lost a fleet at Shipwreck Cove. The Brethren Court had seen Jack become something beyond pirate law. Tortuga remained his throne. The Black Pearl remained his crown. The Flying Dutchman became his shadow. And somewhere beneath impossible water, his heart and soul beat inside a chest no map could find. Jack Sparrow stood at the bow of the Black Pearl as dawn rose over the sea. Below the waves, the Dutchman sailed with him. He no longer needed to chase immortality. He had caught it. He no longer needed to bargain with death. He had stolen from it. He no longer needed to fear betrayal. Because any man who betrayed him could be hunted by the living pearl above the sea and the dead Dutchman beneath it. For the first time, Jack looked at the horizon and did not see escape. He saw territory. His territory. The wind rose. The sails filled. And Captain Jack Sparrow, master of the Black Pearl, captain of the Flying Dutchman, ruler of Tortuga, bearer of the Aztec curse, and keeper of a hidden heart no living soul could find, smiled at the rising sun as if the world had finally become amusing enough to keep. "Bring me that horizon," he whispered. Then his eyes darkened. And everything beyond it. What if Jack Sparrow was evil? Final part. The world no longer feared the sea. It feared what ruled beneath it. For months, the Caribbean had changed under Captain Jack Sparrow's shadow. The old stories had become warnings. The old warnings had become prayers. Sailors no longer spoke of storms as the worst thing a man could meet upon the water. Storms were honest. Storms came with thunder, lightning, black clouds, and roaring waves. Jack Sparrow came with a smile. The Black Pearl sailed above the water like a moving crown of darkness, her black sails cutting across the horizon with unnatural speed. Beneath her, unseen by mortal eyes, the Flying Dutchman followed like a buried nightmare, gliding through the deep with its cursed crew waiting for the command of their new captain. 2 ships. 1 master. 1 heart. 1 soul. Hidden somewhere no map could reach. Jack had become a legend that even monsters whispered about. The British no longer sent single ships after him. They sent fleets. They sent admirals with sealed orders. They sent hunters, executioners, spies, priests, scholars, and desperate men who believed every curse had a rule and every immortal thing had a weakness. Most of them died before they learned whether they were right. The Brethren Court had fractured after Shipwreck Cove. Some pirate lord swore loyalty to Jack because fear had taught them faster than respect ever could. Others fled to distant waters, hiding behind storms, islands, and old names. A few tried to unite against him. They vanished. Tortuga became his capital, but it no longer sounded like the same wild town it had once been. The tavern still roared. The street still stank of rum, blood, and salt. Pirates still laughed beneath broken lanterns. But their laughter was careful now. Every deal was made with one eye on the harbor. Every captain who entered the port first looked for the pearl. Because if the pearl was there, Jack was watching. And if Jack was watching, no secret was safe. Yet even as the world bent beneath him, one thing remained beyond his reach. Peace. Not the gentle kind that good men dreamed of. Jack had no use for that. But the peace of completion. The silence that should have come after victory. He had taken Tortuga. He had deceived the Brethren Court. He had used the British. He had killed Barbossa. He had slaughtered his own crew. He had stolen the Aztec curse. He had murdered Davy Jones. He had become captain of the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman. He had locked his heart and soul inside the dead man's chest and hidden it in the impossible darkness of the hollow depth. He had beaten death. And still, he wanted more. That was the curse no magic had placed on him. That was simply Jack. Far from Tortuga, far from the Pearl, far from the places where men drank to survive the fear of his name, another man stood at the edge of a ruined dock and stared out at the sea. William Turner had changed. He had once been a blacksmith with honest hands and a heart too clean for the world of pirates. He had once believed there was a difference between honor and survival, between love and weakness, between doing what was right and doing what was necessary. Then Jack Sparrow had shown the world what happened when a clever man stopped pretending he had limits. Will had heard the stories like everyone else. At first, he did not believe them. Jack killing Barbossa in cold blood. Jack slaughtering the crew of the Pearl. Jack lying to the Brethren court. Jack ruling Tortuga. Jack standing beside Davy Jones. Jack killing Davy Jones. Jack becoming something worse. Each story sounded impossible by itself. Together, they became the truth. But the truth that hurt Will most was not that Jack had become evil. It was that perhaps Jack had always been evil, and the world had only laughed too loudly to hear the blade being drawn. Will had searched for answers across burning ports, abandoned coves, and wreckage left floating in black water. He had spoken to men who had survived Jack's raids. He had found sailors who had seen the Dutchman rise beneath the Pearl's shadow. He had followed rumors of the hollow depth, of a chest thrown into the sea, of a heart beating somewhere below the world. Most people called it madness. Will called it hope. Because if Jack had hidden his heart, then Jack could still die. And if Jack could die, the curse could end. Not only his curse. All of it. The Aztec Gold. The Dutchman's chain. The twisted souls bound to the sea. The men transformed into monsters. The fear holding the world hostage. Everything Jack had stolen, bent, and poisoned could be broken if someone found the chest and had the courage to stab what was inside. Will knew courage was not the hard part. Finding it was. For weeks, he hunted the impossible. He tracked old currents. He stole maps from dead captains. He questioned mad sailors who spoke in riddles and cried when the moon disappeared behind clouds. He followed the stories Jack had failed to erase, tiny fragments left behind because even the greatest liar in the world could not bury every whisper. And through it all, Elizabeth Swann was never far from his thoughts. In another life, perhaps they would have had peace. A wedding. A home. A future untouched by pirates, curses, and blood. But that life had been taken from them by the sea and by the men who believed they owned it. Jack had become the greatest of those men. A pirate so hungry for freedom that he had turned the entire world into a prison beneath his command. Will could not allow that to be the ending. Not for himself. Not for Elizabeth. Not for anyone. The first true clue came from an old sailor in a prison beneath Port Royal. The man had once served aboard a British vessel sent to hunt Jack after the fall of Shipwreck Cove. His ship never returned. He was found weeks later clinging to broken wood, blind in one eye, screaming about a sea without stars. Will visited him at night. The prison smelled of damp stone and old suffering. Rainwater dripped through cracks in the ceiling. Rats moved between cells. The sailor sat in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, rocking gently while whispering to himself. Will crouched outside the bars. You saw the hollow depth. The sailor stopped rocking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he slowly lifted his head. No stars, he whispered. Will's hand tightened around the bars. Where? The sailor smiled without joy. The sea opened. Where? No compass. No map. No prayer. Will leaned closer. I need to find it. The sailor laughed quietly. No. No, you don't. I do. The sailor stared at him with his remaining eye. Then you need what Jack feared. Will went still. What did he fear? The sailor reached beneath his blanket with shaking hands and pulled out a piece of blackened metal. It looked like part of a compass needle, burned at the tip and wrapped with old thread. He threw away all maps, the sailor whispered. But not all things remember with ink. Will took it carefully. The metal twitched in his palm. Not north. Not south. Somewhere else. The sailor began to rock again. It points to what death wants hidden. Will looked down at the broken needle. For the first time in months, he felt the path open before him. What does death want hidden? He asked. The sailor looked up one last time. Jack Sparrow's ending. Will left before dawn. he stole a small ship from the harbor and sailed alone into waters most men avoided. The broken needle did not behave like any compass he had ever seen. It shook when he sailed in the wrong direction. It stilled when he corrected course. Some nights, it spun wildly until Will almost lost his mind watching it. But he followed. Days passed. Then weeks. The sea changed. Birds disappeared first. Then the wind. Then sound. The water became too smooth, as though the ship was sliding across black glass. The sky above turned empty. No stars. No moon. No clouds. Just darkness stretching forever. Will knew then. The hollow depth. His ship drifted into the center of the Dead Sea. The broken needle in his palm snapped in two. The water opened. Will stared down into a darkness that seemed to have no bottom. The air grew cold enough to make his breath visible. The ship creaked beneath him, not from waves, but from pressure, as if the world itself was trying to decide whether to crush him. Then he heard it. A heartbeat. Slow. Deep. Impossible. It came from below. Will tied a rope around his waist, took a lantern, gripped a blade between his teeth, and descended into the open sea. The water should have swallowed him. It did not. The hollow depth did not behave like water. It held him in darkness, dragging him down without drowning him. Shapes moved around him. Wrecks hung suspended in the black, ships from every age trapped in silence. Spanish galleons. British frigates. Pirate sloops. Boats so old their names had rotted away before any living nation had been born. And beneath them all, resting on a stone ledge in the darkness, was the chest. The dead man's chest. Jack's chest. The lock glowed faintly red. Each beat from within pushed light through the cracks. Will reached it and placed one hand on the lid. The moment he touched it, Jack Sparrow opened his eyes. Far away, aboard the Black Pearl, Jack had been standing at the helm under a grey morning sky. The sea had been calm. The wind had been obedient. The Flying Dutchman moved below, waiting for his thoughts. Then pain struck him. Not in his body. Deeper. His smile vanished. The crew saw it and froze. Jack gripped the wheel. Someone had found the chest. For the first time since he had thrown it into the hollow depth, real fear moved through Captain Jack Sparrow. He did not show it for long. But he felt it. And that made him furious. "Turn her around," Jack said. Gibbs, older and paler than he had once been, stared at him. "Captain." Jack's eyes darkened. "Now." The Pearl turned. Beneath the sea, the Flying Dutchman shifted direction at the same time. Every cursed soul aboard both ships felt their captain's rage spread through the wood like fire. Will pulled the chest onto the ledge and searched for the key. There was none. Of course there was none. Jack would never make it that simple. Will drew his sword and struck the lock. The blade sparked and bounced away. He struck again. Nothing. The heartbeat grew louder. Then a voice whispered through the dark. "William Turner." Will turned. The darkness behind him bent. Not Jack. Not fully. A shape of him, formed from shadow, gold light, and sea mist. Jack's face appeared in the blackness, smiling with fury in his eyes. "Now this," Jack said, "is disappointing." Will raised his sword. "You knew someone would find it one day." Jack's smile sharpened. "I knew someone might try. I was hoping for someone less sentimental. It ends now." Jack laughed. "Ends? William, this is the problem with good men. You see a locked chest and think destiny has politely placed the ending inside for you. We'll step closer to the chest." Jack's shadow moved around him. "You stab that heart, and what do you think happens? The sea forgives? The dead sing? Elizabeth runs into your arms and the world claps. Will's jaw tightened at her name. Jack saw it. Of course he saw it. There it is, Jack whispered. Love. Always love. The cheapest chain ever forged, and men still wear it proudly. Will stared at him. You cut yours out because you were afraid of it. The smile vanished from Jack's face. For a moment, even the hollow depth seemed to stop breathing. Will had struck something deeper than flesh. Jack's voice lowered. Careful, boy. You thought your heart made you weak. So you locked it away. You thought your soul could be hidden like treasure. But you were wrong. Jack's shadow leaned closer. Was I? Will looked at the chest. You became immortal. Yes. You became powerful. Yes. But you became alone. Jack said nothing. Will stepped toward the lock again. That is why this ends. Not because I hate you. Not because I want revenge. But because no man should hold the whole world hostage just because he cannot stand the idea of being hurt. The darkness twisted violently. Jack's rage filled the hollow depth. Above the sea, the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman arrived. The water split as both ships entered the impossible place, one gliding over the surface, the other rising from beneath it with cursed fury. Jack stood at the bow of the Pearl, coat whipping in a wind that did not exist. His eyes burned. Mr. Turner! Will heard the real voice from above. He looked up through the darkness. Jack Sparrow had come for his heart. The hollow depth erupted. The Pearl fired first. Cannons roared into the darkness, but the shots vanished before they reached Will. The Dutchman descended lower, its crew crawling down chains and broken beams like seaborne demons, coming for the chest. Will grabbed it and ran along the stone ledge. The chest was heavy, but not as heavy as fear. Behind him, creatures of the Dutchman dropped into the darkness. Their claws scraped against stone. Their eyes glowed faintly. Their mouths opened with voices that had forgotten how to be human. Will fought them in the dark. His sword flashed. Steel cut through barnacle, bone, and rotten flesh. One creature lunged at him, and he drove it into the abyss. Another wrapped a tentacled arm around his throat, dragging him backward, but Will slammed his head into the stone and cut himself free. The chest pulsed violently. Jack could feel every impact. On the Pearl above, he staggered. Gibbs reached toward him. Jack turned on him with such hatred that Gibbs stepped back. No one touches the chest, Jack hissed. No one. He leapt from the Pearl. For any other man, the fall into the hollow depth would have meant death. Jack hit the darkness like a blade and sank through it, coat spreading around him, eyes fixed on Will below. Will saw him coming. Not a shadow now. The man himself. Captain Jack Sparrow descended through the Black Sea, immortal, cursed, furious, and smiling like the devil had learned to wear eyeliner and gold. Will set the chest down behind him and raised his sword. Jack landed on the stone ledge. For a moment, neither moved. The chest beat between them. Jack looked at Will, then at the chest, then back again. Step away. Will shook his head. No. Jack drew his sword. I was hoping you'd say that. They fought. Not like before. Not like two men dueling over pride, treasure, or escape. This was the final argument between everything Jack had become and everything Will refused to let die. Jack was faster than any mortal man should have been. The Aztec curse had sharpened him. The Dutchman's power had made him something worse than alive. His blade came like lightning in darkness, striking from impossible angles, forcing Will backward across the ledge. Will blocked. Turned. Slipped. Countered. He was not stronger than Jack. He was not immortal. He did not have the sea under his command. But he had something Jack no longer understood. A reason to live that was not power. Will fought for Elizabeth. For every cursed soul. For every sailor dragged into service. For every pirate trapped under Jack's fear. For every man who had been told that survival meant becoming a monster. Jack drove him to one knee. Their blades locked. Jack leaned close, smiling through clenched teeth. "You cannot win." Will looked up at him. "I don't have to." Jack frowned. Will kicked the chest. It slid backward off the ledge. Jack's eyes widened. For the first time, his control shattered. "No." He turned from Will and lunged after it. That was his mistake. Will rose and struck. His blade cut across Jack's side, not deep enough to kill, but enough to slow him. Jack hissed in pain and turned with murder in his eyes. Above them, the pearl groaned. The Dutchman screamed. The chest tumbled through darkness, falling toward the lowest point of the hollow depth. Jack grabbed Will by the throat and slammed him into the stone wall. "You stupid boy," Jack snarled. "Do you know what I am?" Will struggled against his grip. "Yes." Jack's fingers tightened. Will forced the words out. "A coward with a crown." Jack froze. Then his face twisted with rage. He threw Will across the ledge and turned toward the falling chest, reaching out with the power of the Dutchman, calling it back. For one terrible second, the chest stopped falling. It hung in the darkness, trembling. Jack smiled. Then another hand caught it. Elizabeth Swan stood on the broken remains of a wrecked ship suspended below. Will stared in disbelief. "Elizabeth." She looked up at him, soaked in darkness, sword at her side, eyes bright with fear and determination. "I told you I would find you." Jack's smile died. He had planned for Will. He had not planned for love refusing to stay where it was told. Elizabeth had followed Will's trail after he vanished from Port Royal. She had gathered the pieces he left behind. She had followed the same cursed path, not because she knew the sea better than Jack, but because she knew Will better than anyone alive. And that had brought her here. She stood with the chest before her. Jack slowly turned toward her. "Elizabeth," he said, voice suddenly soft. "Think very carefully." She placed one hand on the lid. Jack's tone changed. "You open that chest, and you do not know what you free." Elizabeth looked at him with cold anger. "I know what I end." Jack moved. Will moved faster. He tackled Jack from the side, driving both of them down against the stone. Jack roared and struck him, but Will held on, locking his arms around him with everything he had. "Elizabeth!" Will shouted. Jack thrashed violently. The hollow depth shook. The Black Pearl's masts cracked above. The Flying Dutchman twisted in the water, its crew screaming as the bond strained. Elizabeth drew her sword and struck the lock. Once. The lock cracked. Jack screamed. Not from pain. From fear. "Do not." Elizabeth struck again. The lock broke. The chest opened. Inside beat Jack Sparrow's heart. It was no longer fully human. It pulsed with black veins, gold light, and shadows that moved like trapped water. The Aztec curse glimmered across it. The power of the Dutchman wrapped around it. And beneath both, faint but still there, was the heart of a man who had once wanted freedom and had mistaken it for owning everything. Elizabeth looked at it. For a moment, she hesitated. Not out of mercy for Jack. Out of the weight of what ending him meant. Will looked at her from across the darkness, still holding Jack back. Their eyes met. No words were needed. She understood. This was not revenge. This was release. Elizabeth lifted the sword. Jack broke one arm free and reached toward the chest. "Elizabeth." His voice cracked on her name, not charming now, not clever, not mocking. Desperate. For one final second, the mask was gone. And behind it was not a god. Not a king. Not a legend. Only a terrified man who had hidden his heart from the world and forgotten that hidden things could still be found. Elizabeth drove the sword into the heart. The hollow depth split open with light. Jack screamed as both curses died inside him. Gold fire burst from his veins. Black water poured from his shadow. The Aztec curse burned away first, tearing through every stolen piece of immortality it had given him. Across the world, hidden Aztec gold turned cold and dull. The curse that had touched the treasure lost its grip. Dead men who had been chained to it finally felt their bodies become their own. Then the Dutchman's curse broke. The Flying Dutchman roared above them like a dying beast. Its monstrous crew collapsed to the deck, not dead, but changed. Barnacles cracked away from skin. Tentacles withered. Shells fell. Men who had forgotten their own faces touched their cheeks and wept as they became human again. The ship itself changed. Rot fell from the wood. The sails tore free from the curse. The sea-green glow faded. It was still ancient. Still scarred. Still haunted. But it was no longer a prison. The black pearl shook as Jack's power left it. The unnatural speed, the dark command, the fear wrapped around its boards, all of it vanished like smoke in sunlight. Tortuga felt it too. Men in taverns stopped mid-drink. Pirate captains woke from nightmares. Prisoners in hidden cells found their chains unlocked. Across the Caribbean, the shadow of Jack Sparrow lifted. And Jack himself fell. Will released him as the power left his body. Jack dropped to his knees on the stone ledge, one hand pressed to his chest. For the first time since Isla de Muerta, his heart was gone and no curse remained to pretend he did not need it. He looked smaller. Still Jack. Still dangerous in memory. But mortal now. Empty. Dying. He looked at Will. No smile. No joke. No trick. You could have ruled with me, Jack whispered. Will knelt in front of him, breathing hard, bruised and blooded. No. Jack's eye shifted toward Elizabeth. She stood over the open chest, sword still buried in the heart. The heart beat once more. Then stopped. Jack exhaled slowly. For a moment, something like understanding passed across his face. Not regret. Jack Sparrow had walked too far into darkness for regret to save him now. But perhaps he saw it in the final second. The truth. Power had not made him free. It had only made him alone enough to lose everything. Jack Sparrow closed his eyes. And died. The hollow depth began to collapse. With Jack gone, the place that had hidden his death no longer had a reason to exist. The darkness cracked around them. Water rushed upward. The suspended wrecks began to fall. The stone ledge split beneath Will's feet. Elizabeth pulled her sword free and grabbed the chest. Will shouted her name and leapt across the broken gap toward her. He caught the edge of the wreck beside her, nearly slipping into the darkness below. Elizabeth grabbed his arm with both hands and pulled him up. For one breath, they stared at each other. After everything. After all the blood, fear, distance, and impossible seas. They were together. Will reached for her face. Elizabeth leaned into his hand. Then the wreck dropped. The sea swallowed them. Above, the Black Pearl and the freed Flying Dutchman broke through the collapsing hollow depth into open water. The sky returned in a burst of dawn light. Waves crashed. Wind roared. Men screamed, not in terror this time, but in disbelief. Will and Elizabeth surfaced together beside the remains of their small ship. They gasped for air. Elizabeth still held the broken chest. Will laughed, exhausted and alive, and pulled her close. She held him like she would never let go again. The Flying Dutchman drifted nearby, silent and free. Its crew stood on deck as men, not monsters. Some cried. Some prayed. Some simply looked at the sun as if seeing it for the first time in 100 years. The Black Pearl floated beyond them. No longer a throne. No longer a weapon. Just a ship. A beautiful, black-sailed ship that had survived the darkness of its captain. Gibbs stood at the rail, staring at the place where Jack had vanished beneath the sea. His expression was unreadable. Grief, relief, fear, and freedom all lived there together. He removed his hat. One by one, others did the same. Not to honor what Jack had become, but to bury what he had once been. The sea carried no body back. Perhaps that was fitting. Some men became legends because they deserved songs. Others became warnings because the world needed to remember the cost of becoming them. Jack Sparrow's name did not vanish. It changed. No longer a joke. No longer a hero. No longer the immortal ruler of Tortuga. His story became the tale sailors told when the moon was high and the water turned black. A tale of a pirate who wanted freedom so badly that he chained the world to prove he had none. A man who stole curses, killed monsters, conquered ships, and hid his heart where no one could find it. Until love did. In the weeks that followed, the Caribbean began to heal. The British lost their excuse for endless slaughter when their fleets returned broken and their secret reports exposed. The Brethren Court, humbled and fractured, no longer dared crown one pirate above all others. Tortuga remained wild, but no single shadow ruled every street. Men still lied, stole, fought, drank, and chased treasure because the world had not become innocent. But it had become free of Jack's curse. The Flying Dutchman was taken to open water by its freed crew. No longer bound to drag souls into service, it became a ship of passage, carrying the lost dead gently across the sea until its final duty was done. When the last soul was freed, the Dutchman sailed into the sunrise and was never seen again. The Aztec Gold was gathered by those who understood its danger and sealed away where greed could no longer wake it. The dead man's chest was burned. Will and Elizabeth watched it turn to ash on a quiet shore. Neither spoke for a long time. The fire crackled softly. Waves rolled against the sand. The sun lowered over the horizon, painting the sea in gold. Elizabeth stood beside Will, her hand in his. "It's over," she said. Will looked at the last embers of the chest. "For him." Elizabeth turned toward him. "And for us?" Will looked at her then. For years, the world had pulled them apart. Pirates, soldiers, curses, duty, danger, and destiny had all tried to decide what their love was allowed to become. Now there was only silence. Only the sea. Only the choice they had fought for. Will gently took both her hands. "For us," he said, "it begins." Elizabeth smiled. Not the smile of a governor's daughter. Not the smile of a pirate king. Just Elizabeth. His true love. The woman who had followed him into the impossible darkness and helped him end the monster no one else could stop. Will pulled her close, and this time there was no curse between them. No dying captain. No hidden heart. No sea demanding payment. They kissed beneath the fading sun. And for once, the sea did not roar with war. It simply moved. Free. Years later, sailors would still tell the story. They would speak of the evil Captain Jack Sparrow, ruler of Tortuga, master of the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman, the immortal pirate who hid his heart beneath the world. They would speak of how he was defeated not by an empire, not by the Brethren Court, not by another monster, and not by a greater curse. He was defeated by William Turner. By Elizabeth Swann. By love, courage, and the one thing Jack Sparrow never truly understood. A heart was not weakness because it could be hurt. A heart was strength because it could choose. And on the day Jack Sparrow died, the sea remembered that choice. The Black Pearl sailed on under a new flag, no longer carrying his darkness. Tortuga sang again without fear. The cursed were freed. The dead were released. And William Turner, at last, found his true love not as a dream waiting beyond the horizon, but standing beside him on the shore. The final tide rolled in. The sun disappeared. And the story of evil Jack Sparrow ended where all pirate legends eventually end. Not with treasure. Not with power, not with immortality, but with the sea taking back what never belonged to him.
Nothing can break me.